G'day and welcome to another episode of Kiwi Car Life, and I know that you guys have been wanting this video for a very long time, so finally, thanks to Henry, we've made it happen. This right here is a 1998 Toyota Altezza RS200, and today we're going to be comparing it with my 2006 Honda Accord Euro S. The Altezza, with this being an RS200 model, has a different bumper design along with side skirts and a rear lip kit that really makes this car look nice and meaty and muscular. And likewise with my Accord, it has the factory Modulo kit all around, and then I added a Flow Designs lip kit on top of that too. And to top it all off, both of these cars are lowered, riding on some nice sort of dark grey wheels, which really tops off the exterior styling of these cars. Now let's talk about the drivetrain of these two cars. Because this is an Altezza and not an IS200 or IS300, and more specifically is the JDM only RS200 model, it has a completely different engine under here. This is a 2-litre inline 4, known as the 3SGE Beams engine. Makes about 153 kilowatt or 210 horsepower and 216 Newton meters, which puts it squarely in the firing line of the Honda Accord Euro R, which of course has a K20A with 162 kilowatt and 206 Newton meters. Now my car, on the other hand, is a Euro S or Type S, and this has a K24A3 with 140 kilowatt and 223 Newton meters of torque, but I've done a few modifications to it, which brings it up to around 165 kilowatt and 250 Newton meters. But another thing that's quite different from the Altezza to the Accord is that this has the engine round the other way, because of course this is rear wheel drive, and it can be paired with a 5-speed automatic or a 6-speed manual. In the case of my car, it could also be paired with a 5-speed automatic or a 6-speed manual, like in the case of my car, but it's obviously front-wheel drive. The first thing I noticed when jumping in the interior of the Altezza is just how much sort of smaller and lower and tighter everything feels in here, which does help to create quite a cool, sporty vibe. In terms of build quality in here, well, it is basically a sort of entry-level Lexus product, so it's actually quite good in here, and definitely a step up from most other Toyotas from this era. But the last thing I love about this interior is the gauge cluster. Toyota back in the 90s was known for making simple, boring cars, and yet with this, they made one of the most insane looking gauge clusters you've ever seen. It looks like a chronograph watch. It's fantastic, and I love looking down at it. Jumping into the Accord, and the first thing strikes me is this just feels like a much more modern car. I talked about in the exterior segment how both of these cars look really timeless on the outside, but when you get inside, that Altezza, apart from the gauges all of it, just starts to look pretty darn dated, I've got to say. This feels like a much nicer, more featuresome car, and everything just sort of fits together a lot more cohesively on the inside. The gauges in this car, while they're not as exciting or interesting looking as the ones in the Altezza, they show a lot more useful information. And you have extra stuff like cruise control, dual zone climate control, and the L models of these have, you know, auto lights and wipers and stuff as well. And some of them even have adaptive cruise control. So with this being a more of a 2000s car rather than a 90s car, there was definitely an advantage in that regard, where you have more space, the storage has been more well laid out, and you have quite a lot more features here on the inside. But what you guys really want to see is, how do these cars drive? Alrighty, so I know this is not the most fair because mine's manual and has a few mods done to it, but we're going to do a little cheeky rolling race along here just to get an idea of which car might be faster. 3, 2, 1, go. I'll go in third gear this time to see how things go. 3, 2, 1, go. I think the answer is quite clear. The Accord is the victor. Driving the Toyota Altezza. It's still rear-wheel drive. It's still a sporty sedan, and as we're about to see, still goes sideways, and it actually doesn't go half bad, I've got to say. My only complaint with the engine, it makes a good amount of power, but it just doesn't sound the best. I know the exhaust probably doesn't help, but put it in second here. it's just a very harsh sounding 4-cylinder, and you compare it to the Honda ones, they just have a much more lovely sonorous sound. The automatic transmission, unfortunately, when compared to the 5-speed automatic that's available in the Accord, is not the best. The manual mode works like typical old Toyota manual modes, where it's more of a gear limiter rather than a gear selector. So you set the maximum gear that you want it to go in, so if I've got it in 4th but I floor it, it downshifts, which is annoying. Yes, you can sort of rev match your own downshifts like that, which is quite nice, but it's so just sloppy. Like at low RPM, listen to this. It just feels like a CVT. But above all else though, this car has really surprised me, where that's 100 already. Like, it's not the slowest thing in the world, even with an automatic. And you can probably sort of tell there that the gears change, you know, decently quickly, and they're fairly short gears as well, which is quite nice. I can only get to about 90 k's an hour in second gear, whereas you compare that to like the Accord, mate, we get into like well over 100 in second gear easy. It's a bit of fun, I will admit. I have enjoyed myself driving this, but compared with the Accord, its only real advantage is the fact that it's rear-wheel drive. And if you really want to be a child like me, then that will be worth it to you. But everything else, the trans is not as good as the Accord automatic, because it doesn't have a proper manual mode, and the engine doesn't sound the best. It makes good power, but it just doesn't sound as nice. And I think all of that combined is sort of telling me that I think I'd be going out and buying the Accord over one of these, unless you really want something with rear-wheel drive. But is that really the case? Well, yes. Yes, it is. This car looks just as good, handles just as well, and has just as much street cred and modification potential, and I imagine the manual gearbox would be just as good as the one in the Altezza, but it has a superior automatic transmission. The engine makes a better sound, makes more power when you do modifications to it, because you have more displacement to work with. It has much better steering feel, much better braking feel and braking performance. It has a nicer interior with nicer soft touch materials, more features like cruise control and a better trip computer and dual zone climate. It's just a better car, which you really should expect, because let's be honest, the Altezza is sort of 5 to 10 years older than this Accord Euro. Realistically, I should really be comparing it with like the CL1 Euro R, in which case things are a different story, because with that car, the interior build quality is not up to par with the newer Accord Euro like this, and the engines are known for burning a lot of oil. They don't make as much power as these once you modify them, and in general I would say that an Altezza would compete very fiercely with a CL1 Euro R, especially with a manual gearbox. But when compared with this, the K24 is just such a good engine. I don't really know how else I can put it. It just makes so much power. And with the new short gears, this thing hauls along. And you can just hear, or I hope you can hear, that this sounds infinitely better. Call me biased, I know I was wearing a Type R hat like the whole time I was driving the other car and stuff. I'm trying to look at this objectively, where if I look at it in terms of steering feel, braking feel, engine sound, engine performance, how good the transmission is, how good the interior is, I hope you can understand that objectively the Accord is just a better car, except for the fact that the Altezza is rear-wheel drive, which I will agree is a great aspect of it. And if you want to do skids in the wet, mate, you're going to love an Altezza, especially with a manual. But for me, I'm happy with my Accord, and I think if I really want something rear-wheel drive, I'd be getting a BMW, frankly. But there we go. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Kiwi Car Life. And if you want to see me comparing my Accord with a Toyota Caldina GT4, then click over here. And if you want to see me comparing it with an Accord Euro R that I've talked about a lot in this video, then click over here. And I will look forward to seeing you again next time.